So I finished up Last of Us Part 2 the other day, and I wanted to give just some thoughts on the overall game itself. Now, I will tell you, there's going to be spoilers in this video. There's no way to talk about this game without spoiling something. I honestly have no idea how people were able to review this game and stick to the embargo guidelines and put a score on it, because they weren't allowed to talk about more than like 25 or 30% of this game. So I'm just going to put it out there now. Things are going to be spoiled here. So if you have not played the game or you want to see it for yourself, I would just skip out on this video then. Make sure you like it though before you head out. That'd help out. But let's talk about Last of Us Part 2. So I will say right away, I played through the first game. I liked it. I played it on the PS3. Then I played it again when it dropped on the PlayStation 4 because it was significantly better performance-wise. And for the most part, I enjoyed the game. I thought it was very well done, and especially on PlayStation 3 hardware, it was very, very impressive. And I think the story was good, and the way it ended, we probably didn't need a second one necessarily, because it was kind of left up to your own interpretation as to where the world goes from there, with Joel, of course, wiping out any of the doctors that were there that could have most likely created a vaccine from Ellie for the infection. But we still ended up getting this sequel, and the biggest part about this sequel is the way it kicks off. It starts off in a way that certainly was not going to sit well with most Joel fans. Within 2 hours of the game's start, they kill off Joel. That was the big thing that really kicks off this entire storyline going forward, right? Is that Joel dies, Abby kills Joel, and it was a strange thing, I think, to do this so early on, unless Naughty Dog really, really wanted that shock value in the beginning to let you know, hey, nobody's safe. We killed off Joel in 2 hours. If those leaks hadn't come out, this moment probably would have hit really hard. But we all kind of already knew it was going to happen like weeks before the game came out, and it was memed all over the place anyway, so we all went into it expecting this. I mean, think about if that was totally unexpected going in. There would have been a lot of shocked people online on release day. Anyway, after that, the whole point then is to set off and hunt down Abby as Ellie. Now, the game itself, stepping back and looking at the game, gameplay-wise, visuals, cinematography, it is top-notch. It is outstanding. Very, very good. I would say the overall visuals, cinematography, and the ability to tell the story is definitely better than the gameplay. The gameplay is good, even great, I would say. And a lot of it really centers around your character kind of sneaking through areas or even just blasting through enemies if you want. You can go either route, although as the difficulty ramps up, which you can do in the options, it's pretty clear you would want to use stealth to get through these parts, as you are very limited on supply, specifically ammunition, and the stealth is pretty good in the game. You can come up with all different ways to get around different enemies, and as you get further in, they do introduce different enemies that are smarter, I would say, than what you face in the beginning earlier on, but then they also present you with different crafting formulas, different skill trees in order to deal with them. I really did like the AI of some of the enemies, like the Seraphites. They really would challenge you at times and try to outsmart you, even distract you on one side, flank you on the other, send out search parties, walk around in pairs, whistling back and forth. The gunplay was all right. I don't know. That to me was probably the weakest part of the gameplay. I know they're trying to make it feel like this is realistic and you are human, so you'll miss shots and all of this at times, because they give you, like, of course, a circle that will shrink if you're standing still and aiming down the sight, and then obviously get larger as you're running around spread firing. And it's survival, so they don't want you to be Master Chief, right, running through this. But the melee combat is amazing. Like, it's super impactful. If you catch an enemy who is stunned with like a 2x4 or a hammer or something, and you hit them with it, you feel that through this, like, just seeing it happen on screen. It is very satisfying to do that when you're running through the field and you see an enemy that you can. It's just I mean, it is amazing to do that. And then visually, the game it's the best looking game, I would say, on the PlayStation 4. But even on top of that, the animation and the voice acting brings it all together perfectly. And the environments are super fleshed out with all kinds of detail. I mean, there's detail everywhere. If you go inside of a house, just spend time looking around. I mean, you got stuff hanging up on the fridge. You have notes all over the place. The bedrooms, while they might be like have stuff like strewn all over the place, you can literally look through the closets and see like different clothes they're wearing, and on their nightstand they might have little things out, magazines, jewelry. There's so much stuff populated in these houses to make them feel real. And there are a ton of houses throughout the game, just as an example. And it's tiny little things in corners, places you would never really think to look, that they're obviously trying to decorate and make this feel like a real world that you're exploring in the apocalypse. Now, of course, because this is a video game, it has kind of that same trope that video games and movies have, where an obstacle seems pretty obvious, but then there's like 20 things in the way that make it a 2-hour round trip, right? Like a door's locked. Okay, how do we get through it? Do we kick the door in? No, we go all the way around the house, through the cellar, up over the ledge so that we can get to a window that is just cracked, right? Yes, in the apocalypse, turns out there are a lot of locked doors and open windows. That might be a metaphor. We'll look into that. I also want to point out one early part in the game when you're going through Seattle Day 1, and there is this portion of the game where it's almost like it's this smaller open world style where it feels like you have options to explore rather than it being a more linear style. I was kind of hoping that it would go more that route overall, but that seemed to be just one section in the beginning, and I would have liked to have seen that more going forward. But overall, I like the gameplay. It was great. It was very, very good. Definitely a highlight of the overall game, along with the graphics and the ability to tell the story. Everything there, super top notch. But when we get midway through the game, things started to change a bit. You switch over to Abby, and gotta say, didn't really care. Look, Abby was conflicted, similar to Ellie, right? Because of what was happening, of course, Abby has her own revenge plot like Ellie has hers. So they're both equally conflicted as to how to navigate this whole situation, although Abby gets her revenge very early on, right? But then there are more pieces added on top of that. Basically, because of this revenge plot on either side, bodies start to pile up. And I'm not even talking about all the enemies that you fight in the field that, of course, you take out, whether it's through stealth kills or just blasting them with a shotgun or smacking them over the head with a 2x4. No, throughout the game itself, in the story, all of their friends are pretty much dying left and right. So when you switch over to Abby, they attempt to sell you on Abby, right? And this turns into about half the game. You end up playing as Abby for quite a while. It was a little surprising just how long. And again, if the leaks didn't get out there, this would have been another part of the game that would have surprised a lot of people, just how much Abby is in this game. And unfortunately for Abby, I don't think enough was done to sell her to the gamer, to the player. I don't think enough, because at that point they just watched Abby brutally beat down who, let's face it, a lot of people's favorite character in the Last of Us series in front of them, and then crack their skull open with a golf club, right? It was going to be a tough sell at that. But if we didn't know who Abby was, and I almost thought, what if we didn't know who she was, but occasionally we would change to her, and it's like, okay, this is strange. Who is this? Why are we going through this? And then eventually, towards the end, before the final act, she just kills Joel. Okay, then that would have been kind of out of left field. Instead, she kills Joel right in the beginning, and we spend half the game after that playing as someone that, I mean, let's face it, a lot of people probably don't want to play as her. It was a strange choice for the story. Yeah, there might have even been more shock value if Abby had killed Joel later on. Like, if we didn't know exactly who she was searching for the whole time, and she ran across Joel, and we're like, oh, look, Joel, and then she just smacks him with a golf club and beats him down in front of Ellie and kills him. That would have been shocking, because then we would have had this weird realization that we were playing as Joel's killer for like the first half of the game. Like, that could have been pretty cool to go that route, and might have been even more impactful, but instead the game goes through, you switch back to Ellie, they have their confrontation, there is this weird portion where you're on a farm and for some reason Tommy comes by and tells you where Abby is, and it's the whole thing is filled with convenience is what I will say. There is a lot of convenience where you suspend disbelief or whatever. Yeah. That happens a lot in this game, whether it's Ellie dropping her map so that Abby can find them easily, or falling from a rafters up in like almost like a super tall skyscraper building. Oh, and then just landing in the one pool. That's yeah. A lot of convenience in this game is what I'll say. But it's a video game, so I don't mind it as much. The ending was interesting, I guess. There was no real payoff. It never actually happened at the end, and that's another part that has really, I would say, frustrated and confused a lot of people, right? I would say you look at the ending, and the idea is that really Ellie looks at the situation and says, eventually, the back and forth revenge plot will have to end. Eventually. Now, it could end with Abby being killed, but who's to say, in Ellie's mind, that someone else wouldn't then come after her because she killed Abby, and then the cycle continues, is the idea. And I think they're trying to say, hey, in a world that is full of hopelessness, eventually someone has to stop. And that, I think, is what they were trying to convey there at the end. Really, when you get done everything and she's sitting there unable to play the guitar, you kind of look out and realize it was kind of a waste of time, the whole thing. Now, I mean, the game was fun, obviously, but like the whole thing was, for the most part, pointless, really, if you look at it. I mean, the only thing that really happened is she lost her fingers, they lost all of their friends, and now Dina is somewhere with the baby. So they ended up worse off than they were when they started, which comes back, I guess, to the overall theme that revenge is bad, and we already know that, so okay. I guess we could say that the characters did grow. They met some people along the way. I thought Lev had an interesting storyline with the Seraphites and his mother and his situation. I thought that was at least pretty interesting overall to see, but that interested me more than the overall revenge back and forth plot line, and I would have been more interested really to see Ellie and Joel throughout this storyline together, although they did, of course, work through that with different flashbacks, even one fairly impactful flashback at the end that, once again, didn't have any payoff. I think just looking at the overall story, it just didn't hold up to the visuals, the cinematography, and the gameplay. I think the story was probably the weakest part of this entire game, and it was like this close to being game of the generation. It was so close, but it didn't quite make it. I think it's still God of War for me, but I did at least like the game itself. Even if the story I thought was, I'm gonna say, average at best, the game was still fun, and I think it's still worth playing through. But those are some of my thoughts on Last of Us Part 2, guys. Let me know what you think about it down below. I liked the gameplay, I liked the visuals, I liked the cinematography, the audio, everything was good. The story was just kind of average for me. In fact, I look at the story and they could have either restructured it or told a completely different story, because I look at it and I go, I don't even think it doesn't even really need to exist, like, at all. The story itself, I mean, it feels like they killed Joel just so they could have something like this to tell, right? Like, they probably could have gone and done something completely different, and it probably would have had more lasting effect on the overall world and lore itself. But let me know what you guys thought about it again down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.